Hello everyone, this is Gary Wills. Welcome to episode 43 of my YouTube channel, and this time I'm going to do something slightly different. This will be a playthrough of the Eckmuhl scenario from the General Dame 2 rulebook. So the genesis of this video goes back to me watching Storm of Steel's excellent review of General Dame 2 and online while I was painting. Got a bit carried away and gave him a comment, and in that comment I said that there was a great review, but for me the rules had many issues related to mechanics which don't bear close inspection. As you might expect, I was immediately challenged by several people to expand on my thoughts, and in particular Scott from Check Your Leader TV in Australia, who's a big champion of the rules, wanted to know what I felt, and we had a bit of an interchange in the comments section. This is the response I gave Scott, and I'm not going to go in through it now because it's surpassed by this video. In the discussion, a couple of people, led by Jack Charge Painting, asked me to develop the whole theme in the form of a video for my channel, and I thought it was a good idea, and thought the best way of doing it was for me to run the Eckmuhl scenario from the rulebook, which is a division rather than a core level game, so that's a bit of a proviso. I have played General Dame 2 plenty of times at my local club, and so I'm not coming at it as a novice, but it's the first time I put a game on myself. So the question I'm really trying to answer in this video is, given that General Dame 2 are so popular and receive a lot of attention around the world, why don't I use them for my own games? So this is the scenario as published in General Dame 2. It's a part of the Battle of Eckmuhl in 1809 between the French and the Austrians, and it's on the Austrian right flank, around the village of Oberschanding, and involves a division of French led by General Friant attacking a division-sized force of Austrians on the hills opposite them. And the objective of the exercise is that the French inflict 2 wavering results on the Austrian troops. So here are the Austrian defenders for the scenario. Essentially 3 brigades of infantry and 1 of cavalry, as you can see here. For this game I just decided to use a tally sheet for recording casualties rather than on table markers, and you can see that they're marked with the various levels of erosion of the battalion. And here you can see the French division, which comprises 3 brigades of infantry and 1 of cavalry, similar to the Austrians. One of the things to say at this point is I did look at using GDA 1 for my Villamuriel replays, but that fell over because in GDA 1 you get 1 ADC per brigade, and the French division at Villamuriel only had 2 brigades, so there were only 3 brigades on the table, which rather anjacks the ADC system. In GDA 2, one of the big improvements is that each division is given 5 ADCs as a standard allocation, so you get away from that problem. Most detailed account of this particular fighting was from F.L. Patra's 100-year-old book, Napoleon and Archduke Charles, which surprisingly was more detailed than Gill's excellent work. And here is the passage, if you want to pause and read it, and together with the map from Petra's book. So just a few words about scales. The base of my figures, 15mm figures, are quite close together. So for the scale of the game, I use actually the 28mm scale in the rules, but replace the inches by centimetres, which reduces the distance relative to the standard 15mm scale. Consequently, the forwards tasking adds 6 centimetres plus 2d6 centimetres to standard movement, for example. So, regard the figures you'll see on the photographs, the Austrian infantry and cavalry are all heritage 15mm, whereas the French plus the rest of the Austrians are minifigs 15mm strip, so they're a bit smaller than the heritage. All of these were bought in the late 1970s while I was at university, and I don't have a full coverage yet. So the Austrian Chevalier Léger are standing in for the Hussars, and Austrian Jaeger standing in for the Grenzers. Also, the Austrians have to use captured French caissons. So one of the good things about General d'Armée is the setup is detailed in the rules. So here's the brigade quality die rolls, which basically ended up with all brigadiers being standard. And here's the scouting roll, another feature of General d'Armée. And the French won 1-0, but obviously it's a solo game, so it wasn't really used in the same way. But it affects the deployment of the French, or didn't, as the case may be. In this case, there was no advantage in deployment for the French. So this is the view of the table. The bottom of the picture shows I added a bit onto the battlefield because the scenario finishes at the village of Oberschanding, but it just worked out given my ground scales and the size of my board. And here's another view of the battlefield from the French side. To give you a short tour of the battlefield, this is von Ries's brigade holding the town or village, which was held by the Landwehr battalion. You can see von Ries's brigade here in close up with his brigade skirmish screen alongside the Landwehr battalion in the village. And here you can see von Neustadter's brigade with their brigade skirmish screens out up front. Under the scenario, the Austrians are on defend orders, so they can occupy anywhere up to the centre point of the table, which is marked by the stream. And here's a close-up of von Neustadter's brigade, with his brigade skirmish screen, 3 infantry battalions, and the artillery on the hill. On the left, we have von Grill's brigade, his 3 infantry battalions on the hill, and his skirmish screen again down by the stream. And here's a close-up of von Grill's brigade. He's positioned himself in the middle of the trees to maximise the brigade deployment area, and he has his brigade skirmish screen supported by the Jaegers or Grenzers, according to the scenario, ready to reinforce the screen. And finally, in the centre, we have von Radivojevic with his cavalry brigade of 2 light cavalry regiments ready to move to wherever was needed. You can also see here the 2 French caissons with the Austrian commander-in-chief. Using the Austrians, we have on the French left Grandeau's division of 5 battalions plus their artillery and brigade skirmish screen. On the French right, we have Gilly's 5 battalion brigade. So as a campaigner, Friant was able to place 2 brigades off the table as reserves, and he chose the cavalry brigade and Barbanegra's 3 battalion infantry brigade as such reserves. So that's the setup part of the game covered. I think one comment that is I do want to make about it is that one of the things I like about General Dame 2 is that all of the setup process is a part of the core rules. All of those steps that I've referred to are part of the core rules. In other games like Black Powder, which I normally play, these things are left out of the core rules and put in the scenario design and left to the 2 players to come up with. And yeah, that works. I've used that successfully, but I think it's quite useful having it in the core set of the rules, particularly things like the differences between the different levels of commander, with Friant being better than Hohenlohe, the Austrian commander. That has impacts on setup and the like. So now we'll proceed to the game. And one of the things I want to apologise for at this point is that some of my photographs were obviously taken in too much of a hurry and were not focused enough. So they're not very good, is the short answer. However, they're good enough to make the point I'm trying to make in the presentation, so I've included them in. So I apologise for that. It happens several times during the game. So here we start, game turn 1 of 16, with the ADC roll for both sides. And you can see Austria ended up with 5 ADCs and from the French only 1, despite the fact that Friant has an adjutant and every turn can re-roll a single score of 1. I'll start with von Ries's brigade. I won't do this on every turn, on every brigade, but just to show how the game works. Von Ries was given a brigade tasking for his ADC, which enabled him a re-roll, and this meant that he was successful, avoided the dreaded 1 or 2, and could obey orders. Whether the cavalry brigade weren't given a brigade tasking and ended up hesitant. So von Neustetter again given brigade tasking and got obey orders. Von Grill was given a brigade tasking and skirmish tasking and got that away. French side Grandau was given brigade tasking and got obey orders. Whereas on the French right, Gilly was given forward tasking with brigade, and this was to get this brigade as far forward as possible to allow the reserves to come on. This shows the initiative roll for turn 1, and because they had a hesitant brigade, the Austrians threw 3 dice, selecting the worst 2, and consequently lost the initiative to the French, although they lost it anyway. One point that's worth making while we're talking about ADC taskings is obviously the Austrians are really not required to do anything. They just have to avoid 2 wave of results, so they can afford to sit on the hill. So they don't need as many ADC taskers as the French do, so they can use skirmish and artillery assault quite regularly. It also makes the scenario a good solo scenario because the Austrians can win just by sitting still. And here we see Gilly taking his forwards tasking with 15 centimeters of additional movement, advancing quickly to the stream. Meanwhile, von Grill used his skirmish tasking to reinforce the brigade skirmish screen. And here you can see the rest of the battlefield and the slower advance of Grando's division, brigade rather. And here you can see the view from the French side, and obviously the French deployment is slightly biased towards the right and centre. Basically, Frion in this case is following the advice of Check Your Leader TV and others on the internet who advise leaving Oberstanding well alone. Okay, so we're now moving on to game turn 2. So the ADC role gave 4 ADCs to the French and only 3 to the Austrians. Again, von Grill got skirmish tasking with his brigade reroll. Von Neustaedter in the centre got obey orders. After being hesitant in the first turn, the Austrian cavalry again went back to obey orders. And likewise, despite not having a brigade reroll, Maurice's brigade managed to obey orders. On the French side, Grando's brigade with brigade reroll got obey orders. On the French right, Gilly, again with the brigade reroll, successfully got away the forwards tasking again. So in the initiative roll for game turn 2, the initiative went to the Austrians. Here's the overview of the battlefield at the end of game turn 2. On the French right, Gilly got forward with a total of 10 centimeters extra movement from his forwards tasking. And in the centre, Grando's brigade skirmish screen is closing in on the Austrian opposite numbers. And on the French left, obviously nothing's happening. And here's the French casualty sheet at the end of game turn 2. And this is the Austrian casualty sheet with not much happening, apart from a fatigue casualty. So here are the ADC rolls for game turn 3, with French getting 5 ADCs and the Austrians only getting 2. In the French centre, Grando gets away his forwards tasking, while Gilly gets skirmish tasking. Opposing Gilly, von Grill also gets skirmisher tasking. With no hesitant brigades on either side, the initiative roll is a simple die roll, with the Austrians winning 7-6. And this shows the Austrian right around Oberstanding. In the French centre, Grando gets 8 plus 6 centimetres additional movement. And on the French right, the Gillies brigade continues to press forward against now superior numbers of Austrian skirmishers. Also in this turn, the Austrian cavalry moves forward to try and stop the French infantry advance. And here's the French casualty sheet at the end of game turn 3, with the long-range artillery fire doing the damage. Meanwhile, the Austrians are showing just a single fatigue casualty on one of their artillery batteries. So moving on to game turn 4, here we can see the ADC roll, with the Austrians getting 5 ADCs and the French also getting 5 ADCs. After the taskings had been allocated, there were no hesitant brigades, So it was a straight roll off with the French winning the initiative. So in the charge phase of game turn 4, the Austrian Chevalier charged the nearest battalion of French infantry, which was one of the light battalions. They ended up making contact with Elan and unforming the French infantry. And you can see here in the combat phase at the end of the turn, the Chevalier broke the French light infantry as a result of their charge. Meanwhile, Gilles' infantry have continued to advance, apart from the other battalion of French light infantry, which has formed square. And this is a view of the battlefield at the end of game turn 4. On the Austrian right, Maurice's brigade, with nothing to their front, have been given a redeploy tasking, allowing them to cross the halfway line of the battlefield. In the centre, the Austrian Chevalier have rallied back from their successful charge. On the Austrian left, using a general's order and facilitated by the steady advance of Gilles' brigade, the French cavalry have deployed onto the battlefield. And here's the French casualty sheet at the end of game turn 4, showing the loss of the first 15th Leger. Meanwhile, the Austrian casualty sheet shows trivial losses to the Austrian cavalry from the melee and from artillery fire. So in game turn 5, the French won the ADC role with 5 ADCs to only 3 Austrian ones. Well, the Austrian right, obviously confused by their redeploy order, Maurice's brigade went hesitant. And so did von Grill's brigade on the other Austrian flank. On the French right, Gilles' brigade obviously was faltering at the end of game turn 4 because of the loss of their battalion, and that meant they rallied only to hesitant in the following turn. Consequently, in the initiative phase, the French rolled 3 dice and the Austrians rolled 4, with the French winning 6-4. And this shows the overview of the game at the end of game turn 5. And you can see here on the Austrian right flank, Maurice's skirmish line is still able to advance into the flank of Grandeau's advance in the centre. And you can see here an overview of that, the centre part of the battlefield, with the Austrian cavalry getting ready to face off against the French cavalry. You can see here that Gilles' brigade skirmish screen on the French right has been forced back by the superior numbers of Austrian skirmishers to their front. Here's the French casualty sheet at the end of game turn 5, with Gilles' battalion starting to take heat from the Austrians. Austrian casualty sheet still fairly clean. Now moving on to game turn 6 with the ADC roll with basically 4 each. And in the initiative roll, despite having one hesitant brigade, the Austrians managed to win the initiative 10-6. With that initiative, the Austrian Chevalier charged the French cavalry, were thrown back, with the 2 French units left unformed. And here's a view of the centre of the battlefield. An overview of the whole field, showing Maurice's brigade starting to move to make their outflanking attack. So you can see here the French casualty sheet with the cavalry brigade having taken some heat. And you can see here that the Austrian cavalry brigade has obviously been significantly damaged by the combats. Now moving on to game turn 7. The French got 3 ADCs against the Austrian 5. In the initiative phase, despite a hesitant brigade, the French managed to win the initiative 6-5. So here we see an overview of the battlefield at the end of game turn 7. And here's a shot from the position of the Austrian centre. On the Austrian left, the brigade skirmish line from von Grill's brigade has been pushed right against the baseline by the advancing French infantry from Gilly's brigade. You can see this here from the French perspective. In the centre, the skirmish duel is reaching a crescendo with von Neustadter's brigade skirmish screen reduced to 2 bases. Meanwhile, on the French left, the infantry of von Ries's brigade have advanced towards the flank of Grandeau's brigade. And here's the casualty sheet for the French. And here's the one for the Austrians, who, apart from the cavalry, are doing pretty well. We now move on to game turn 8, where in the ADC role, the French got 4 and the Austrians got 5. There were no hesitant brigades, so the initiative dice was a straight roll off, which the Austrians won 10-8. And here's a view of the battlefield at the end of turn 8. And you can see at the bottom of the picture, Barbanegra's brigade, the other French reserve brigade, has been deployed on the battlefield. And this shows the battlefield from the Austrian perspective. Von Neustadter's brigade withdrew its skirmish screen because they were already reduced to just two bases. And here we can see the situation on the Austrian left, where von Grill's brigade is being hard pressed by Gilly's brigade. And another view of the Austrian position. And finally, for turn 8, here's the French casualty sheet. As you can see, Gilly's men are attracting some casualties from von Grill's brigade. Meanwhile, the Austrians are still reasonably untouched. So moving on to turn 9, for ADCs, the French got 5, but the Austrians got only 4. And obviously, I missed the fact that the Austrians should have got 5 with their double 6. On initiative, the Austrians had one hesitant brigade, so they ended up losing the initiative 11-2. This is the view at the end of game turn 9. Barbanegra's brigade used the initiative to charge in to von Ries's advancing Austrians. Combat resulted in 2 retreat results, which caused the von Ries's brigade to falter. In the centre of the battlefield, the artillery fire from the French centre forced the 1st Dipsic Hussars, or Chevaliers in my case, to disperse. And this resulted in another falter result for von Radivojevich. And to complete a bad turn for the Austrians, the skirmish brigade of von Grill's brigade, pushed against the back of the board, was forced off the table by Gilles' advancing infantry. And that forced von Grill's brigade to also falter. And finally, here's an overview shot of the Austrian position at the end of game turn 9. So here we can see the French casualty sheet at the end of game turn 9. And here's the Austrian one. Now moving on to game turn 10, we see that the Austrians get 4 ADCs and the French only 3. So apologies for this photograph, but we can see as a result of the falter test, von Grill's brigade were able to rally to hesitant. However, the cavalry brigade, the Austrian cavalry brigade, got a wavering result. However, von Ries's brigades got a rally result in their falter test. So this is the table at the end of game turn 10, and another view from the French perspective. In the centre, you can see here the remaining Austrian cavalry retiring as the French cavalry advanced into their. The other thing that happened in this turn is von Ries's brigade skirmish screen, having become separated from the rest of the brigade, was forced to disperse. This is another view of the battlefield, this time from the Austrian perspective. With von Grill's skirmish screen out of the way, the French moved forward with their own skirmishers to try and engage von Grill's main body. Final view of the battlefield from the Austrian position at the end of game turn 10. Here we see the casualty sheet for the French at the end of game turn 10. And here we see the Austrian sheet at the end of game turn 10. The cavalry brigade is now only a couple of casualties away from completely dispersing, so they will be hanging back quite a lot. So moving on to game turn 11, the ADC rolls ended up in a 4-all draw, with both sides losing an ADC. With one hesitant brigade on the Austrian side, the initiative roll ended up 8-6 in favour of the French. Here's a shot of the battlefield at the end of game turn 11, showing that with the Austrian cavalry out the way, Grandeau's brigade felt secure in advancing across the stream. The Austrian infantry to receive them started to change formation into line, and at the end of their line a square to receive the cavalry. Here's a view of the assault going in at the end of game turn 11. And here's the same view from the French perspective. On the Austrian left, von Grill's brigade came under strong skirmish fire from Gilles' brigade skirmish screen. And here's a final view from the Austrian position. And here's the French casualty chart at the end of game turn 11. Together with the Austrian chart, which shows that von Ries's brigade has quickly lost a lot of men. Moving on to game turn 12, we can see here that the French have got 4 ADCs, which despite re-rolling 1, they got another one. While the Austrians did well, rolling 3 6s, which gave them an extra ADC, so they got 6. There were no hesitant brigades, so the initiative was a straight roll-off, which the Austrians won 6-5. Forgot to take photographs during game turn 12, so you have to make do with the casualty chart. Here for the French, and here for the Austrians. So we're hurtling towards the end. Game turn 13 of 16, and we can see here in the ADCs the French got 5 against the Austrians 4. So Barbanegra got away a forwards or tasking to continue his meteoric assault. However, he was met by an equally determined von Rees with his own forwards tasking. However, in the centre, crossing the stream was obviously too much for Grandeau's division, who went hesitant. And Gilly's skirmish fire was enough to send von Grill's brigade hesitant. Gilly got away skirmisher tasking as part of his orders phase. So in the initiative role with one hesitant brigade each, the French managed to win 9-5. On the Austrian left, Gilly was happy to let his skirmishers do the talking while his close order columns formed up in the shelter of the woods. Meanwhile, on the other flank, Barbanegra's leading battalion charged in to create havoc with the Austrian infantry using their. Consequently, the Austrian foot battery, which was trying to escape limbered, was dispersed by the French charge, which again faltered von Rees's brigade. Now here's a shot from the Austrian perspective of the battlefield at the end of game turn 13. And here you can see the French casualty sheet at the end of game turn 13. And here's the Austrian one, showing the extent of damage to von Rees's brigade above all else. Here we move on to game turn 14, and the ADC role was spectacular. Both the French and Austrians rolled a double six, and consequently, the Austrians ended up with 6 ADCs, while the French had 5. And despite having one hesitant brigade, the Austrians still managed to win the initiative following a really poor French roll. And this shows the overview of the game at the end of game turn 14. A significant result during game turn 14 was the success of von Rees's brigade, much damaged. However, it managed to push back Barbanegra's infantry across the stream. In the centre, the infantry of von Neustadter's brigade is now entirely in line, facing the oncoming infantry from both Grandeau and from Barbanegra. On the Austrian left, von Grill is trading space for time here. We're close to the end of the battle. He doesn't have to do anything. He just has to keep his unit together. So he's pulled back. And here's another view of the Austrian centre at the end of game turn 14. This photograph highlights how von Riese was able to make such progress. He got the general's order, stand with me, at the beginning of the turn. And here you can see the French casualty form at the end of game turn 14, and highlighted here is the amount of casualties that von Riese's brigade has managed to inflict on Barbanegra. However, it's a bit of a Pyrrhic victory, as von Riese's infantry herself are pretty much on their last legs. Turning now to game turn 15, and the French scored another double six with their ADC roll, so ended up with 6. Whereas on the other hand, the Austrians had a disastrous roll with only 2 ADCs. However, with each side having a hesitant brigade, the Austrians managed to win the initiative 8-6. So here's a view of the Austrian right, French left at the end of game turn 15. And this shows the Austrian centre with the French infantry closing in on the the strong line of Austrian infantry. Meanwhile, uh, Geary has sent his infantry in to push back the extreme left-hand battalion of the Austrian line, as you can see here. Here's another view of the Austrian centre at the end of game turn 15, and a view of the whole battlefield at the end of game turn 15. And a view of the Austrian right at the end of game turn 15, with the two sides staring at each other, and a view from the Austrian perspective of the same issue. This casualty sheet for the French at the end of game turn 15, and also for the Austrians at the end of game turn 15, with von Riese's brigade definitely looking the worse for wear. So we now move on to game turn 16, which is the last turn in the scenario. And in the ADC rolls, sixes are started to abound, and both the French and the Austrians got a double six, so they had an extra ADC as a result. Meant that the French had 5 ADCs and the Austrians 4. And here's an overview at the end of the game turn 16, at the end of the battle, in fact. And here's another slightly different angle. And you might as well see all of the photographs, another angle of the end of the game. This shot of the Austrian centre shows how Grandeau's infantry battalions charged and pushed back von Neustadter's brigade in the Austrian centre. However, on the Austrian left, von Grill's brigade held off the assault by Gilly's brigade. And on the right of his line, the French fire from Barbanegra's brigade resulted in the dispersal of the 1st Coburg Infantry Regiment. Likewise, on the Austrian right, the 2nd Chastelier Infantry Regiment from von Riese's brigade succumbed to the artillery fire of Barbanegra's brigade. And we can see here the final view of the French casualty sheet. And here's the final Austrian casualty sheet. So despite inflicting 2 Falter results on one on von Riese's brigade and one on von Neustadter's brigade, the French had only managed to inflict a single waver result on the Austrians before the end of game turn 16, and therefore the game ended in an Austrian victory, whose decision to just hold their ground and let the French do all of the work had obviously paid off. Obviously, being a war gamer, I did try the Falter tests at the beginning of game turn 17, and indeed the second French waiver result happened then. So that shows you how close a run thing it was. So that was the end of the game, and I thoroughly enjoyed the game. It's a Napoleonic War game, of course I enjoyed it, and I thought the overall game system was pretty tight and worked well as a game. I found it easy to use the rule book throughout the game to keep it moving. The charge sequence and tests I liked that in General Dame 1, and I also like the brigade skirmish screen, if only because this is how skirmishes were normally organised during our period. The other thing I liked was the whole integration of the off-table reserves into the main rules rather than leaving it to the scenario designer. I thought that was good, as indeed was all of the setup stuff, which other rules could learn from, really. And the other thing I liked was the general orders. Friant had 2 general orders he could give, and Hohenlohe had just 1. But they were used, and I thought they worked well within the game. So that even more comes back to the question, that's the whole purpose of this video, is why don't I use such a popular set of Napoleonic rules? And so there's a series of issues which I'll go through, of which probably the first one is the most important. I think the ADCs, when you think about them, it's quite a nice idea. Generals have ADCs, good to have them sent off doing missions, and all of that sounds on the surface of it good. However, it does slow down the game, and for me, the benefit is pretty limited. Although in the past I've talked about the limitations on the numbers of ADCs you get and that impacting on the taskings you can choose. In this scenario, with the new 5 ADCs per division, we ended up with quite a high number. So 4 Austrians ADCs per turn, and 4.5 French ADCs per turn. So in that regards, the new version of the game is an improvement. For example, in my Villa Muriel games, which is one of the early games in my series of videos, I did try to use General d'Armée 1 for that game. But in that game, the French brigade division is only 2 brigades. So we'd only have had 2 ADCs. So it would have averaged probably 1.5 ADCs per turn. So it doesn't really work. So this is the ADC change in General d'Armée 2 is clearly a benefit. However, this was a great scenario for a solo player, because actually when you looked at the victory conditions, the Austrians were best served by trying to hang on to Obersanding and just doing as little as possible, just waiting for the French to push them off the hill. The consequence of this as regards to the ADCs is they don't need ADCs to do much. Therefore, their skirmishers have skirmisher tasking most of the time, and their artillery have artillery assault most of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And this immediately gets you on to asking, well, what are these taskings supposed to represent? The rules are quite clever and cute about it. They don't actually say what they represent, although others online have talked about them deploying extra companies to the skirmish line, or extra caissons, extra guns to represent artillery assault. If it's if there's those two things, they shouldn't be happening every turn. And in my book, if they're going to happen every turn, you might as well increase the defenders' fire factors. It's just not adding anything to the game. I'm going to come back to the ADC mechanic in the next slides. But just to finish this slide, there are a number of niggles. I wouldn't say they're all the amount. They're certainly not the reasons I wouldn't use the rules in future. But it didn't seem sensible to me to have streams offering cover. I understand the reason why you would do that, but the low hedges as opposed to overhead high hedges not offering cover didn't seem to really stack up. Another lesser issue is the short support distances are really short, and consequently it drives unhistorical deployments. You know, attacking columns are supposed to, if we follow the drill manuals, attack at deployment distances, and that's simply not what happens in a General d'Armée game. And it's interesting because one of the ways of looking at the way the rules work is that you sort of have these little pieces of action that are isolated from the rest of the battlefield. So therefore, these short support distances don't matter that much. But it doesn't look right, in my view. A personal preference for me, but the use of 2d6 for combat and firing resolution is pretty swingy if you're both throwing the dice. So, you know, I'm not sure I like that. And yeah, you get extreme results with other systems, certainly in Black Powder. which I play a lot, but it's it isn't something I'm most comfortable with. Oh, the final one is, I guess it's because I'm an old timer, but this great innovation of adding dice to initiative rolls and this sort of thing, you can see where it's coming from, and certainly, from what I've been able to calculate, adding a third dice, picking the two lowest, is effectively giving a -1 score to the uh, to that hesitant brigade. But I'm not sure when it gets up to 3, 4, 5 dice being rolled, whether that's a sensible option. Anyway, getting back to the bigger issues, the whole episode and fighting this game has made me think about um, the overall design of Napoleonic war games, and I think there's obviously several ways of looking at it, but one way of looking at it from that seems helpful from my point of view is what sort of game are they? And if you look at the blurb on GDA2, it says the player represents the force commander in chief who, for the use of ADCs, attempts to bring command and control to the battlefield where chaos would otherwise reign. Likewise, LaSalle 2 on its back cover says take the role of a corps or divisional commander in the Napoleonic Wars, i.e., these games are set up to be general centric. And I've even heard people say that unless you are pitching the player into that role, you're not doing proper wargaming, which is an interesting point of view. So that's one side to think about, the general centric games. On the other hand, you have what I've called battle-centric games. So in Black Powder 2, on the back cover, it says the author's aim is to enable and encourage the reader to recreate the great battles of the 18th and 19th centuries with armies of model soldiers on the tabletop. Likewise, Valor and Fortitude is a set of tabletop wargame rules designed for fighting battles using paramilitary razors. It's played by 2 or more players, divided into 2 sides. Each side is an army, and so on and so forth. So that's more battle centric than it is general centric, if you like. There's obviously a balance. No game is all general centric or all battle centric in the spectrum of things we call war games. Arguably, chess is general centric, full blown, and not battle centric at all. But most war games are somewhere on a balance here. So one way of describing a general centric set of rules like GDA2 is that these emphasize the actions taken by the player representing the general. Whereas in battle-centric games, the command in general is just one element of the game. And if you like, the game develops a narrative around the battle as a whole rather than just the general. If you ask yourself what a general division, which is the level at which the scenario is targeted, what a general division's core battlefield responsibilities are, they look like this: tactical manoeuvring, asset coordination, command arms, committing their reserves, and obviously morale and leadership using the physical presence of the general. If you look at the classic French deployment of their divisions as listed in some of the source material I could give you, essentially a general division would have a frontline brigade or brigades, some reserve brigades or brigades, plus his artillery assets at division level. And obviously the division general's role is to manage the use of all of that, particularly when to commit his reserves and where to use his divisional artillery assets. And if you've got a game that is trying to mimic what they do, that's what you need to be mimicking, if you like, or modeling. And the key question for me is how does how is the chart that I've just given you reflected in the ADC taskings as shown in General Dame 2? And some of it reflects it reasonably well, some of it doesn't. But I think there's a bigger piece of frequency that's important. So for me, frequency is an important thing. And what I mean by that is if you're designing a game of chess, uh, then all game designers will tell you that every turn in that game, the players need to be making decisions that materially influence their side and the outcome of the game. Otherwise, why are they there? And I get it. I get that message for games like chess. However, you'll if you look at um, applying that principle as GDA2 does to a Napoleonic war game, what you find is that the division commander is having a choice to make every turn, which represents, according to the rulebook, 5 to 15 minutes of actual time in the model. So you're provided with lots of those sort of interactions. However, I don't believe that level of frequency tallies with my reading of Napoleonic history. Yes, division commanders did impact the game. It did impact the battle, but probably not running around every 5 minutes telling one brigade commander to do this and another brigade commander to do that. It reminds me of one of my earlier videos where I used Valor and Fortitude to refight Chrysler's Farm. In the practice games for that, I quickly got fed up with the card system that goes with it because you needed to draw a card every turn and you ended up with a hand full of cards, half of which you forgot what they did by the time you came to use them. So in that video, I halved the number of cards that were used in the game. And it's the similar sort of logic is and the frequency of which you expect the very senior commander to influence the game. The alternative view, which is one I've subscribed to, is that the game is an unfolding narrative of the whole battle. Yeah, I'm interested in how the skirmishers fight. I'm interested in how individual battalions fought, whether they form line or not, whether they form square when the cavalry charges them. Yes, the division commander or the corps commander is important, but you have to recognise that those commanders have done most of their work in getting the division to the battlefield. And yes, they will run around on the day, but they're hoping that their brigade commanders will do the business on the day. So really, that's the reason why I probably won't use GDA2 in future. I prefer games where the general is part of the system, not the focus of the system, because I don't think they ever were the focus of the system. If anybody asks me if I'm interested in Napoleon, I say no. I'm interested in the guys that fought for him, and in particular, I like to see the battle narrative play out, and I don't think you need a lot of the embellishments that GDA2 has worked hard on it, incorporating the rules to have a reasonable game. From where I sit, in fact, it gets in the way because it's hard to remember everything. Now, in summary, what have I got to say about GDA2 and this scenario? This scenario is a great scenario, particularly for solo play. It's a great introduction to GDA2 as a rule set. And GDA2 as a rule set is a good set of rules and deservedly popular um, uh, with our community. They're just not for me. I don't believe that they do what they say on the tin. I don't believe they represent what division commanders would do on the day, and I prefer to focus more in the overall narrative of the game, of the battle as developed by the rules. I mean, interestingly, even under GDA2, you still spend a lot of time doing the narrative of the battle. Once you've got past the ADCs and the initiative stuff at the beginning, you can see that in the videos that Dave Brown has put on YouTube. But arguably, if you want to be totally general centric, you don't need any figures at all. You need some sort of deck building game. But anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed playing the game. Happy that I bought both editions of GDA2. I just probably won't be using them in future games. Well, thank you for getting this far in the video. It's been a bit of a long one, but I hope you found it useful. And if you did, please like and subscribe to my channel, which could do with as much support as possible. And if you're interested in things I've got to say on military history, then please buy one of my books that are shown here. Thank you very much. Good night.